Very warm welcome to you, dear viewers. You are watching OBN Horn of Africa weekly program Future Africa. Today, I have very special guest who joins me from Israel, Dr. Tegenu Gosa, researcher on African history. In this episode, we are going to talk about Ethiopia's assertion to seaport accesses. Doctor, very warm welcome to the program and thank you for joining.
Thank you. Nice to see you again. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. From international laws and experiences, do you think Ethiopia has the right to raise such a question?
It has the right to raise these kind of questions because Ethiopia is the country, the second biggest, with the second biggest population in Africa, and the population keeps increasing. And Ethiopia has economic aspirations, and Ethiopia is, over the last 2-3 decades, have registered significant economic growth, and Ethiopia's economy is expanding. And as a result, Ethiopia's reliance on only one port is not going to be sustainable. So Ethiopia has the right to seek for more opportunities and more potential sea access that can facilitate this trade and of course economic growth. And this is very much crucial for Ethiopian economy and the future of Ethiopian economy, which is really showing a lot of promise. And this promise is not necessarily or entirely for Ethiopia only. And regional countries are going to benefit a lot from this one. So if this is seen positively, it has a lot to contribute to not only Ethiopia, but also to the regional countries. So it has, and of course, international law supports this kind of cooperation-based engagement, including access to the sea. But we need to be very careful here. When we say that Ethiopia has a right to ask the question, it doesn't mean Ethiopia can enforce these questions. Ethiopia can ask this kind of question, but we should continue to engage with the neighboring countries in a peaceful manner and in a principled manner, so that this question can be answered to everybody's benefit.
Different media and institutions and regional commentators are circulating negative speculations, including the likelihood of this quest leading to war between neighboring countries in the Horn of Africa. Where do you think those perceptions stem from? And is there any reason to expect this quest leading to conflict of any sort from Premier's speech?
This is an interesting question, and because I have been following this story, and there are many media personnel and, of course, politicians, analysts coming up, and including some of the early response from the neighboring countries, which seems to be a little bit negative in a way. And where does this stem from in general? One, the question could be seen surprising and shocking to everyone because of the negativity and how it is perceived. And secondly, and most importantly, when we see where the negativity stems from, we have to look at our history, the history of the Horn of Africa in general. This negativity largely stems from our history. The Horn of Africa, in the last 100 years or more, I'm saying 100 years, let's say, since Ethiopia is created as a unified nation. It's almost more than 100 years. And neighboring countries, Djibouti as an independent country, it has a history of not more than 50 years. And Eritrea, 30-something years, as you know. And Somalia became independent in 1960s. So since these countries became independent and fully independent, and you can see all these Horn of African countries running into all kinds of problems, conflicts related to boundaries. And so the region has no a history of cooperation, solidarity, mutual engagement, mutual trust. And what we do have is suspicion, mistrust, to be honest, and conspiring against one another. And of course, major powers from outside of the region have hand in it to the large extent. But it's all this long history of conflicts, mistrust that I mentioned, that is literally driving these kinds of negativity. And the pool of all these kind of negative response always emanates from this kind of historical uh, accounts and historical readings. And so when the premier came out and said that Ethiopia's access to the sea should be guaranteed, everybody is shocked. Oh, what is Ethiopia thinking? Is it going to invade Eritrea for Assab? Is it going to invade Djibouti? Is it going to invade Somalia? How is this going to happen? These are sovereign countries. And for everybody, it's shocking because the analysis stems from all the history of conflict and, of course, everybody and everything living on the edge in this region, politically speaking. But there is no reason to see this thing negatively. And I think I say this is an interesting question because if we look at it positively, this will be actually the beginning of an opening of new chapter for the region in general. Closing and maybe closing this curse of conflict, mistrust, and cooperation, and opening a new chapter of cooperation and mutual trust and collaboration. So I say in general, it's our history that's behind all these negative views. Politically speaking, the Horn of Africa and in African in general, we continue to suffer from these colonial legacies and colonial boundaries. And if you look at the port on the Somali side, 5 of them, by the way, Somalia has 5 active ports. And there is a very inactive one, which is Zaila. Otherwise, you do have Berbera, you do have Bosaso, you do have Mogadishu, is a port itself, the capital. You do have Ismailu, you do have Hargeisa. On top of that, there is a port which is totally out of function since the medieval ages, which is Zaila. And this country, Somali, ethnically, do live in Kenya, they do live in Ethiopia, they do live in Somalia, and somehow, of course, partly in Djibouti. And these are one people divided along colonial line. And there is no need to be suspicious of one another. And I'm just saying, like from a political point of view, and how these colonial boundaries have split and cut through one people living in the region. And the same thing we can say about the Afar people living in Djibouti, living in Eritrea, living in Ethiopia, majority of them being in Ethiopia. See, we could not see ourselves beyond these artificial colonial boundaries. And everybody is just, this is becoming, these colonial boundaries are becoming a stumbling block and hurdle between us. That's why we call them really hard lines, hard boundaries. And even though we are one people living along this vast stretch of land. And so no reason to be suspicious except this big hurdle in between us. And there is actually a lot we can benefit from one another if we continue to engage positively and work together and work towards economic integration.
From a global experience, several landlocked countries have got access to seaports using give and take principle. What makes Ethiopia's case different?
It's not really any different. It's the political narratives that are superseding and overweighing the real benefits, economic benefits of the whole story. As I said earlier, because of our long history of conflict and mistrust between countries, In the region, everybody thinks and sees things from this lens of conflict. Somebody is going to invade me and grab my land, and somebody is going to look for opportunities by taking away whatever I do have. But there is not any of these things. And by living as we are today, where the region in general is poor, and nobody is benefiting what. And I told you there are ports, including us, that are running out of function, and they're just sitting idle. But if taught well and if planned well, there is a huge room of exploiting and bringing them into function and benefit everyone, not only Ethiopia or one country in the region. We should not forget South Sudan. To be honest, in this topic, it's not a quest only of Ethiopia. There is a double landlocked country called South Sudan, which is also part and parcel of this.
In your view, what opportunities has Ethiopia got to gain seaport access peacefully from its neighbors?
It has a lot of alternatives, and it has a lot of potentials. This is very important. Even though all countries in the Horn of Africa are sovereign countries whose boundaries and territories should be respected, and I must underline that all countries in the region, and of course across Africa, do not have equal potential of development because of resource, because of population size, because of development, whatever. Now, when you look at today's Ethiopia in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia has shown great economic potential, and actually the promises Ethiopia's economy has shown over the last 2 to 3 decades brought the country to be the third biggest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, overtaking most of the neighboring countries in the Eastern African region, say Kenya or Tanzania. Yeah, as I said earlier, all African countries in the region, in the Horn of Africa, are sovereign countries whose territorial integrity should be respected. This should be underlined. But I want to stress that all countries in the region do not have equal opportunities or potential of growth. This is just related to resource. This is just related to population, for that matter. And so, and as we have seen over the last 2-3 decades, Ethiopia has shown great economic potential and have shown real growth, making the country today the third biggest economy in sub-Saharan Africa. So, and this Ethiopia needs to continue to maintain the pace of economic growth. It should continue to grow. And this grows, as I mentioned around the beginning, it will require more access to the sea and to trade and to move all the manufactured goods and services and all this kind of stuff. So Ethiopia's economic potential has a great promise to propel the entire region forward, economically speaking. So if Ethiopia continues to grow, the countries in the region will benefit a lot from it by providing service, access to the sea, and all this kind of stuff. So Ethiopia's economy has the potential to drive the economy of the region forward in general. That's why I say that the countries in the region need to see this question positively, and not necessarily for the sake of Ethiopia, but for the benefit and the economic opportunities Ethiopia's growth is going to bring to the entire region. So if they answer the Ethiopia's quest for access to the sea, it means countries are going to benefit a lot down the line.
Dear viewers, you are watching OBN Horn of Africa Future Africa program. Till the end of our program, stay connected. Since a couple of years, Ethiopia is trying to use alternative seaports from its neighbors, including those in Kenya and Somaliland. But most of these seaports lack infrastructure like roads, petrol stations, services, and repair stops. These are to support huge logistics. So what if these neighboring countries co-develop the ports with Ethiopia and use them in a mutually beneficial way?
This is again another interesting question. And before I answer your question specifically related to all the ports that Ethiopia is trying to use, I actually want to underline one thing related to the previous topic. What are the opportunities Ethiopia has? One thing is very much important. And I should stress that there are people talking about this quest and saying from the point of legality of the matter. In a diplomatic engagement and in the quests ongoing, I think we should avoid these provocative discussions. We should not dwell too much on the legality of the matter, because even if international laws support Ethiopia, there is no international entity that's going to answer this specific question, because it depends. It's going to infringe on other countries' territorial sovereignty. So we should approach by emphasizing on diplomacy. Peaceful diplomatic means that will guarantee the mutual benefit of countries in the region. And so our engagement, our diplomacy should focus on the peaceful means than engaging with the legality of the matter. None of the international organizations or actually countries can guarantee Ethiopia's access to the port by any of international mechanisms that are, or even treaties and all this kind of stuff. But the most important thing we should focus on is the more Ethiopia continues to grow, the more Ethiopian economy shows promise of growth and benefit to the entire region, the more this question will have legitimacy and credibility, and countries looking at these benefits will positively respond to this one. In the meantime, so we should not forget, when I'm saying this quest to have access to the sea is a long shot. Answer to this question will take a very long time, because this is not an easy, we have to trespass, we have to bypass all this curse that we inherited from long history of the region. So it's going to take time. In the meantime, Ethiopia should continue to advance other alternatives. And these alternatives brings us to your question. That is, Ethiopia should continue to diversify its port opportunities. Ethiopia should continue to be engaged, not only waiting for countries to develop the infrastructure, the road access, maybe the railway line to be built, but Ethiopia should continue to invest in these infrastructures so that countries will see that Ethiopia's quest for access to the sea is a positive thing that will have an impact on the economy of each country. And because Ethiopia is also a big country, we should not expect it to have access to the sea in one direction only, through Djibouti or through Assab, through Berbera or Zaila for that matter. We should diversify. The southern part of the country, southwestern part of Ethiopia, can access the Kenya's Lamu port for that matter. Or in the future, like the Kismayu, the Mogadishu ports can serve as such. Given that Ethiopia, Somalia will be a peaceful country, and all these ports can be utilized. But in the meantime, I think the project of Lamu is a promising one, not only for southern half of the country, and of course for that matter, South Sudan can use it, So these countries can, I think there is an initiative which is already underway um, between Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Kenya to use the Lamu port. And so Ethiopia should continue to invest in this one also. And the same thing with, I think, if you want to access Barbara or Bosaso, again, there is this issue of road infrastructure that needs to be upgraded and constructed. And Ethiopia, I think, in the short and medium range, should continue to diversify its opportunities. Relying on one port is not going to help us, and even in the coming 5 to 10 years, during which I don't think this quest for access to the port of Ethiopia of its own will not be answered. We should continue to invest, and we should continue to engage and show the promises. And the biggest weapon Ethiopia has all along is continue to maintain speedy growth. This will show that Ethiopian economy has a potential for everyone in the region. So this is, I think, the way forward.
Some analysts believe that Ethiopia's quest for seaport access will open up a new chapter of relationship with Horn of African nations on equitable terms for the use of these seaports. How do you reflect on this?
It does. It does, and as I mentioned one phrase earlier, saying that this is going to open a new chapter in the region in general, and it's going to propel the economy forward with a great potential for countries in the region to mutually grow. And of course, it's going to open a new chapter, really. This has great potential. And because when we talk about the peaceful means of acquiring sea access, one of the best alternative out there is Ethiopia investing in the ports and owning it, like the administration of some of the ports. It can be anywhere. And when you're talking about this, and people are talking about ASA, people are talking, and I don't think actually we should specify any of the ports that potentially could be one of the port that Ethiopia can target, but the potential is huge and immense. And the potential is not just a hypothetical talk here. And as I mentioned earlier, Ethiopia's economy is growing fast, and it has shown a promise. And Ethiopia is the third biggest economy in the region, in the sub-Saharan Africa in general. And if we look at the Eastern African region, it's now number one. So the more Ethiopia's economy grows, the more it will take everybody in the region on board and help them alleviate their own economic problems. So this is going to open a new chapter. By the way, when we talk about the new chapter, this Ethiopia's quest for more access, diversified access, or access of its own in which it can invest, is part and parcel of regional bodies, goals and missions, stated goals and missions. It's part and parcel of the mission and goal of African Union itself. And I don't know how this can be seen negatively, really, to be honest. And it's a bizarre form. And one of the goals of AU, Agenda 2063, is about creating free trade across Africa. And creating free trade is directly related to the ability to trade with the outside world, which requires port, which requires facilitation of port and access to the port. Without port, Ethiopia forget the security issue the premier was mentioning, forget the political affair. But if Africa has an agenda, or if Africa wants to pursue an agenda of becoming world economy, African Union should continue to engage with the neighboring countries to facilitate the platform in which this quest of Ethiopia, which is very much positive and legitimate, should be answered. Because it is part of the stated agenda of Africa itself. Given the promise Ethiopia has shown in terms of growth, given the promise and leadership Ethiopia is playing in integrating the economy itself and propelling the economy of the Horn of Africa forward. Over the last 2-3 decades, Ethiopia has shown, this is a record, and it has become the region's biggest economy. So, all the regional bodies, continental bodies, should continue to support these Ethiopias, seek for more access to the sea. I want to call it more access to the sea. Ethiopia, when you put it in such a way that Ethiopia wants to have its own port, it feels that Ethiopia is going to infringe on anybody's right or territory or something like that. No, Ethiopia is just asking for more access and more guarantee so that this economy can benefit its own people, its growing people, huge number of people, and also the region by default. So IGAD is an intergovernmental organization on development. One of the IGAD's mission is facilitating mutual growth between countries, and of course security. So it's related with what the mission of IGAD, in which all these countries are members. So it's also part and parcel, and I can say it's in line with Pan-African ideas. When AU was the founding fathers of AU, laid out a plan, a roadmap, envisioned a plan, saying that Africa should be first economically integrated, and then this will serve as the platform for African political unity. How do you integrate Africa economically without port and growth in manufacturing and logistics and all this kind of stuff? No way. So it's pretty much in line with the agenda that the African founding fathers have envisioned for Africa itself. Economic integration should start regionally, and because of all reasons, countries in the region should see this quest positively, and they have to engage positively with Ethiopia. And I think this can be. And of course, for a while, in a short term, people might not see this, the outcome and the benefit of all this, but eventually I think they will understand. To summarize some of my topics I've been speaking about, and the issue of port that Ethiopia is seeking, more port, more access to the sea, is a very legitimate and beneficial one. And as I stated, it's going to unlock a lot of development potentials for entire countries in the region. And as I can see, this is going to open a new chapter for mutual cooperation, prosperity, and development across the region. And I think this daring question is going to, if seen positively and engaged as such, it has a potential to put the curse behind us, the curse of mistrust, conflict, and conspiratory narratives here and there. And it's going to open the new chapter for the entire region. And because Ethiopia's development is a development for everybody in the region. And Ethiopia has shown this politically by trying to help neighboring countries. And Ethiopia has no history of invading and infringing on any other neighboring countries or any other countries. Ethiopia has never invaded any country in a region, for that matter, and beyond. So Ethiopia is the host of African Union. Addis Ababa is the capital of African Union, a diplomatic capital of African Union itself. And African people Ethiopia's economy in multi-fronts have shown great promise, and countries in the region have a lot to benefit by positively engaging with Ethiopia and guaranteeing more access to the sea for the country.
Have you got anything special to add before we end this session, Doctor? Or you have concluded?
Not much, and I just want to repeat the phrase I'm using here. Let's put behind the curse of cycle of violence and conflict in the region, and think positively. And this is a new era, and this should be the era of cooperation. And of course, this is an era in which Africa should seek its place in the world, economically speaking, right here. And that can be ascertained and guaranteed by mutually working in solidarity and cooperation. And African peoples in any neighboring region, whether it is Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Sudan, for that matter, and Kenya. These are brotherly and sisterly countries, and there is no need for any mistrust on this topic, and there is no hidden agenda on this topic. And we should, if we want to put aside, get rid of the cycle of conflict and destitution and economic underdevelopment in the region, these kind of daring questions should be answered and seen positively. And I hope everybody will understand as such, and the better day will come for the entire region. And thank you.
Dr. Tegenu Gosa, researcher on African history, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, and have a good day.
Dear viewers, this is all we have for today. Thank you for watching.